So, Shannon,
Hmm.
we acknowledge that a significant portion of our fan base, assuming we have one,
Let's say audience, okay? Because fan base, that's rather presumptuous.
very well said. I don't disagree with that. Is probably in Toronto or the GTA. Having said that,
I'm not sure I've ever had a fan. So even
I
in my
mean,
own house,
I would suggest you're probably accurate in that assessment. But what do I know?
Thank
In
you.
any event, we do not want to suggest for a second that there aren't people across the country, certainly across this province in smaller markets, that watch or listened to our radio/television program for many years, and perhaps even
No,
pay attention to what we're doing now.
Bob, I think they on the TV side, as we proved many times, you had a national following. So that's
Well,
not presumptuous. That's fact.
Well, to my point, there are numerous markets in this province where hockey is about the junior game, and the junior game has disappeared, and in the province of Ontario will not be back this year. And so to that end, we'll discuss the announcement from just a day or so ago by David Branch, the commissioner of the Ontario Hockey League, that the OHL has now shut down for this season.
Yeah, it should be noted that the Western League tried to do a 24-game regular season with hopes of running a playoff series. Well, they did the 24 games for the most part. Some teams had to opt out, like our friend Bruce Hamilton in Kelowna had to opt out because of COVID. But they did not even think about going to a playoff format. So there will be no Western League champion. The Quebec League has sputtered along a great deal this year. They've tried and tried and tried. And now any playoff they're going to have, they're inviting any team that can ice a team to the playoffs for the President's Cup. So junior hockey at this level and even lower levels, a lot of them haven't been even to get off the ground, has been a real challenge this year and since the pandemic started.
Well, from a sporting perspective, they have been the real victims of this pandemic, and we're going to address the recent decision and what happens in the future. And I don't know that we know that.
And no Memorial Cup, right? And no Memorial Cup.
Again, right?
Right. Second time in a row.
Dave Branch, commissioner of the OHL. Is he still the commissioner of the CHL as well?
No. Dan McKenzie's the president of the Canadian Hockey League.
I thought that was the case, but Mr. Branch will join us on the show today. Before we do that, Bob Cratchit, victories for both the Blue Jays and the Raptors last night. Both of them rather impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Blue Jays got off to a quick 4-0 lead. Had to put another Band-Aid bullpen together that did a good job, good enough. They're up 4-3 going to the ninth, but it would look like nervous time. Well, it's always nervous time at Fenway. And the Blue Jays managed to come up with a couple runs in the top of the ninth inning and salted away, beating Boston 6-3. And then the Toronto Raptors finally put a roster together that didn't need to be introduced to each other at the opening tip, and managed to beat the juggernaut Brooklyn Nets, albeit minus 2 of their stars.
It took a little while, though. I mean, the Brooklyn seemed to dominate
the first half.
Yeah. That's right. Brooklyn seemed to dominate the first half. Can you just imagine how relieved Nick Nurse would have been walking into the locker room, seeing familiar faces and knowing full well he didn't have to overcoach? I mean, and just let those guys play. When you talk about people that have had a difficult job doing their job this year, Nick Nurse is one of those guys where with all the accolades he received for so long, he might have done his toughest and best coaching this year and with very little result.
Look, there have been injuries. There have been COVID implications, significant COVID implications.
Yeah.
With regard to this team. But the last 10 games or so, the question has legitimately, I believe, been raised as to whether this team is tanking. Did they hold out players that were healthy enough to go? And it's hard to argue that that wasn't the case.
Well,
What do you think?
Well, when you look at individual performances, I mean, Siakam's numbers the last 8 games, 25
But
points a
Siakam
game.
sat a couple of games.
Yeah, but I would.
Van Vliet came back for one, looked fine,
Here's the thing.
then sat.
The question is I don't think this league, I don't think the draft has near the importance in this league that it does in football or hockey. Particularly this year in college basketball.
I would argue that point strenuously.
This year?
Any year. I mean, the notion that basketball's draft is not important.
It's only 2 rounds. I mean, it's not the
depth of the draft. It's the quality of the players.
Right.
And the fact that essentially you play with 5 or 6 players on a regular basis. And that's the roster you have to fill. Everybody after 6 is more or less just another guy. And there's hundreds, thousands of those out there. You want to find the pea in the pod, but that's really what it's all about.
But I think more accentuated than that for me, Bob, is this year's NBA draft. I don't think this year's NBA draft is worth tanking for, to be honest. I don't.
Well, I think in the NBA, honestly, I disagree. I think in the NBA, any draft is worth tanking for, regardless of the quality of the talent. And I don't think it's as much the quality of the talent as the knowledge of the quality of the talent.
Yeah.
Because so many teams played fewer than normal games, and it's much more difficult to assess. And scouts didn't travel much, couldn't travel at all.
I think you're coming to my side now.
No, I think there's importance in every NBA draft. Now, I wouldn't say I'd tank for it. And I don't think we can sit here and say definitively that that's what the Raptors' plan was, but it sure looks like it. And now all of a sudden they've won 4 in a row. They're, in the hunt for that 10th spot. Who knows? Maybe they could move up to 8 or even 7. I mean, I think that would take a pretty good run, and I'm not sure they're capable of it. But barring something unforeseen, I think you're going to see the Big 4 play on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, for our friends of the Tampa Raptors, good seats still available.
Well, yes, if they sell them.
They sell a few in Tampa.
Well, they sell a few. I don't know if any of those seats that they sell
are
available, and I don't think you do either.
The play-in game in Tampa.
Well, there's about 50,000 seats empty.
Yeah,
but they're not available.
That'll be about 4,000 by the time they get to the play-in game. So.
You think what are you saying that they're going to put 14,000 people in that arena?
4,000. 4,000.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So there's 15,000 empty seats there, or seats with cardboard cutouts.
You haven't got a cardboard cutout, huh?
I have several cardboard cutouts.
Let's send one to Tampa. See if we can get you on TV.
Yeah, which network would be more inclined to show that cutout?
TSN.
Probably.
Yeah.
But
I have friends. I have friends there.
Even then, they hate me almost as much as the other guys, it seems.
Oh no, Bob. Everybody.
Or more accurately, they hate you and just associate that hatred with me.
Don't leave me out of this.
I can't. You're here every day.
Oh, I enjoy the veal.
I keep waiting. I keep waiting for you to not show up, but so far your
hey, Bob,
attendance record is perfect.
Nothing else to do.
Nothing else to do is exactly right. All right, we'll take the break, and when we come back, what happened to junior hockey and what is going to happen to junior hockey? I think we can answer the former. I'm not sure if we can answer the latter. Dave Branch, commissioner of the OHL, joins us when we continue after these messages. Bob McCowan, John Shannon on the program once again today, and with us a longtime friend. The commissioner of the Ontario Hockey League, David Branch, is with us. Well, wish the news was better. I'm sure you do too. It is now going to be 2 consecutive years without a Memorial Cup, without major junior hockey. This was not a decision that I know you reached lightly, easily, but I got the sense, David, that 2.5 weeks ago, you actually thought you might play in Ontario. Is that true?
Absolutely. And that's been part of the roller coaster here, Bob, without question. All along, we knew that we must receive, firstly, permission from the chief medical officer for return to play. And then we must, receive permission from the province. And about 2.5 weeks ago, everything came together. And we were on the eve of an announcement when I received a call from the premier saying, "Hey, Dave, some things have come up here. We have to put it on hold, the announcement. Give us a couple of days." Well, of course. And then, all things seemed to unravel rather quickly with the new variant, the rising numbers, and all the challenges with health. And we had to be then subjected, as we should be, to the lockdown and lockout, or call it what you may. And that was extended to May 20th, which effectively said that doesn't give us enough runway to reasonably put something on the ice for our players to achieve their goals, largely focused on the NHL entry draft, July 23, 24. So that's how close we were. And the real hurtful thing here, of course, is that it impacts on the players. And they're the ones that, were so disappointed, along with our teams, our communities, but the players first and foremost.
Let me ask both of you guys what you perceive the impact to the entry draft, the NHL entry draft, to be as a result of an entire year of not seeing any of the kids from the OHL. I mean, to you first, David, do you have any sense as to how NHL teams are going to react?
Hey, the hockey community, the hockey person is very resourceful. They all have never say die attitudes, which I experience on a regular basis in our league. I mean, the top players in our league up to this year's draft are going to be represented starting in Dallas, Texas, World Under 18. So they have a pretty good foundation, okay, to present themselves in the eyes of the National Hockey League. We as a league hope to, and our league has 13 players on Team Canada. We as a league have been discussing, along with our partners in the West and Quebec, about an expanded top prospects event, ideally end of June, certainly no later than the first part of July, where each of the three leagues would send a top prospects team, 20 players each. So that would expand the base somewhat for us, for our players. It still isn't where we want to be. We're working on other thoughts. We don't know if this expanded top prospects event can necessarily occur because of, the pandemic, health restrictions, travel restrictions. So we're doing everything we can, back to your question, Bob, to try and expose as many of our players as possible for the National Hockey League, for their consideration. Unknown yet how successful we will be, but yeah, we there's a lot of work to be done in that area.
John, what's your assessment of this?
Well, the resourceful nature of, as Dave talked about, of scouts and player personnel people in the NHL is amazing, and they've probably been getting iPhone footage from, community colleges and where these guys have been skating. But there, in many ways, and I'm not an advocate just of Canadian major junior hockey, but in many ways, these three leagues are at a tremendously unfair advantage. NCAA hockey did, finish a season. The USHL has tried to finish a season. The amount of players that have not been seen that were supposed to be seen for these three leagues is a lot less than I think people anticipated. It's going to be difficult. Dave, my question to you is where is you have a great relationship with the NHL. Where are the NHL? Because in the end, the byproduct of this is it affects the next step for these kids. Where's the NHL in helping you with the prospects games? And I assume that they would be in a jurisdiction that is a lot less restrictive than Ontario is.
Yeah, well, first of all, just back to your earlier comment, as we all know, the West had an abbreviated season.
Right.
Quebec has worked hard to have a season and have had some success, some challenges. So those two leagues at least have presented their players reasonably. And, you know, NHL teams will have footage and other such things.
Pretty small sample size, right? Pretty small sample size, though.
Absolutely, without question, John. But in discussions with the NHL, they're there to support us any way they can. And so the blueprint that I mentioned about 3 top prospect teams from each of the 3 leagues is on the table. And so far, we've been led to believe that their interest, their support is there.
Do you have any idea, David, how many of your players are skating on a regular basis? Or maybe more accurately, are you aware of players that haven't even stepped on the ice in an extended period of time?
Yeah, I think there was a period of time, Bob, certainly for Ontario-based players, where, and are you talking about the draft class or all players?
No, all players.
All players. So let me just start over again on that. We had close to, I think it was 29 players went to Europe to play.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
We had, and I don't have the exact number, I should have, who the 19-year-olders went and played in the American Hockey League. Okay. And we lent those players all under the conditions that when we started up, they would be
returned, right,
and so forth. And Europe and the AHL were true to their word for the WHL players and Quebec players. So there's been some opportunity there for some players, okay, to continue to play. In terms of ice, like my understanding is that in the province of Ontario until very recently, there were rinks that were open. There was ice available. Excuse me. And excuse me. And there was arrangements where our players were in fact skating, as you might say, on a regular basis. So it's not as if they've been cold turkey here in most cases from not being able to be on the ice and play somehow, some way.
Hey, if you had done the return to play, what were you going to do with your American teams?
Good question, John. Initially, we were going to have all 20 teams in the province of Ontario. And we were going to have 4 hubs, protective environments, of 5 teams each, spread around the province, working in conjunction with government, because we had to not be insensitive to hotspots, you might say. Mm-hmm. And we had actually initially a 40-game season drawn out on that basis. And the players would have stayed in hotels and we would have fed them there. We would have had all the protocols in terms of testings and other procedures that the NHL had, because the government made it very clear to us. The gold standard is the NHL, MLSE, OSAG. You have to meet those. So we set out about our business, and you know what? I mean, we were able to achieve the medical approval. Okay, but then, you know, by the time we got to that point, and then because of other setbacks along the way with the virus, we then had to look at shortening the season, et cetera, et cetera. And it reached a point, John, where the last model that we had would have seen the 3 U.S. teams going to their respective centers and playing against each other for about 20 games, okay? And we reduced the number of hubs from 4 to 3. So that's some of the, you know, things that we had in play.
How would the economics of that have worked? And I mean, we can get into this almost ad nauseum. I have a friend, business associate, who owns a major junior team who 12 months ago, 15 months ago, well, maybe not 15, but 12 months ago was bemoaning the fact that he was paying his coaches, paying his staff, and had virtually no revenue. This is a league, and I think you would acknowledge that lives primarily off gate receipts. We talk a lot about, John and I talk a lot about the major professional sports leagues, and the fact that they're playing in front of no people certainly has economic impact and serious economic impact, but it doesn't mean they're all losing money.
They're losing money. They're just not losing as much as they thought they would.
Well, if you had brought us games back and had to put players up in hotels, give them per diems, feed them, bus them or whatever to the arena, all the things that you would have to do with the restrictions that are in place, where's the revenue coming from?
Yes, well, I mean, and all the testing, Bob.
Well, that too.
Millions of dollars in testing alone to meet the standards. So just backing up to your opening comments, we shut down March 11th. Couldn't finish our regular season last year. Didn't have our playoffs, on and on and on. And we know the scenario this year. So at any rate, one of the things our owners collectively certainly agreed to is to respond in every fashion to the standard player agreements we had with all our players. And the big thing there was our scholarship program.
Right.
This year we have 343 players on scholarship, and the payments for that alone is about $3.5 million. But our teams were meeting that along the way. And so at any rate, we had discussion with government, and they quickly come to understand our financial model and some of the challenges we had. They basically, said, listen, and this was through mutual discussion, we're not looking for money for our owners. In the truest sense, what we're looking for is how do we help the player experience? How can we support the players for training, through the drug testing, meals, accommodation, all these extraordinary expenses that would come at us. So government, we presented some budgets, some forecasts. They went through it with us. First of all, they pledged $2.35 million towards our scholarship program, which we received, which was a significant boost on the academic side. Secondly, they were prepared to contribute to drug testing, meals, accommodation, travel for the players in these hub centers. And, significant contribution and significant support. And the one thing I must say is that, the Premier of the province has been outstanding to work with, as has his people. I mean, our sport minister, Lisa McLeod, and the chief medical officer department led by Dr. David Williams. They've all been open. They've all allowed us to have clear dialogue with them. And we were able to arrive at a plan that made it economically feasible as well, Bob, to survive.
So what you're saying, David, is they were prepared to provide you and did provide you with economic subsidies from the government of Ontario in order to make this happen?
They would, yes. They hadn't, but they would. They did provide us with the scholarship relief.
Right.
And that was their decision.
Yeah. So to be clear, if I'm at fourth line winger, I'm an overager playing in Sudbury, that my third year was shut down last year. My fourth year in junior hockey was basically invisible this year. I'm still going to get my scholarship.
That is right, John. That's a commitment, that we recognize we have and recognize that we must respond to. Yes.
I want to appreciate that you didn't disagree with me being a fourth line winger, though. So
at best, yes. Well, let's just say you would have competed for a wing spot on the fourth
Oh,
line.
stop it. Stop it. Come on. Competitive, very competitive.
I believe that, John.
Have you had any conversations, discussions about the possibility of extending eligibility given these unique circumstances? In other words, maybe allowing a player to play an extra year beyond his eligibility?
We're now entering into those discussions, Bob. We were totally focused and confident we were going to come back and return and play. With this announcement comes a number of things that we have to address, which we quite frankly hoped we didn't have to. The overage player is the one that really jumps out at us.
Yeah.
Because there's such empathy towards these young guys, and what we can affect there is unknown right now. I don't want to give any impression that it's going to be easy. We had 2 other leagues that in fact played, albeit, briefly in some respects. And we have to be mindful and be on a level and equal playing field, when it comes to overage players, as an example, when you go to the Memorial Cup and other such events. So it's not without some of its challenges, quite frankly. And then you want to as well, bring in the new young players at the other end. So how do you have a balance? How does this work?
Yeah.
I do know, Bob and John, that our teams, as we've entered into this discussion, one of the good things I would suggest, and I don't have the analytics on it, is that many of our overage players, as we know them to be, have commitments from and accepted commitments from university sport teams,
Right,
schools. So they're going to be moving on with their life per se, and that's great to see, great to hear. And I'm aware firsthand that there's several that I'm aware of that is the case. The other player who was hoping to maybe get a minor professional opportunity, I don't know how that's going to sort out, because it's been quite a trickle down effect, as you gentlemen well know,
Sure.
how this pandemic has affected, all leagues at all levels.
Mm-hmm. So actually, you touched on something there about bringing the young player in, as you are the feeder league to the National Hockey League, major midget, and you have a draft. You have to put players on your clubs. How are you going to manage that? Because there wasn't very much midget hockey to scout this year.
Yeah. John, will be, first of all, announcing in the next week to 10 days, the order of selection. We've got a system process, how to determine that in place. And secondly, shortly thereafter, the date of our draft. It would normally be held in April, as you know. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing, though, it's something to what you said, John, already, is the resourcefulness of our people. And there were a number of skates. There was some competition in certain pockets, and what have you. Our teams feel that they have a reasonable understanding of who the players are and are comfortable proceeding with our normal draft. And will their knowledge be as deep? No. Will they make some mistakes? Undoubtedly. But we will be proceeding, and like I say, in the next week to 10 days, we will announce the date of our draft.
You can't tell us just today, because we always need news on our podcast.
I wish I could. We have to get it ratified, actually. So I was on a committee meeting this morning, and we're refining and defining some of those elements around return to play.
We don't question in any way, I don't think anybody would or should, the economic impact of to these junior teams. But we should also understand that, like professional teams, there are ownership groups and organizations that are significantly wealthier than others. There is a distinct advantage to being in certain markets and having a certain fan base than others. is there a rev share program in place in some way that has allowed those of your franchises who are in smaller markets with smaller rev streams to survive?
We've had some what we call soft revenue sharing, to your point, Bob. That's been in play. It's been important. And, I'd like to point out that generally speaking, we're an interesting collection, right? And of markets, size, arena facility sizes, and on and on and on.
Sure.
And I mean, my experience has shown me that the smaller market teams, in many ways, have incredible community support and have many benefits that the bigger markets don't necessarily realize, in terms of some sponsorship locally, arena deals, just general community support. I can tell you through this, though, we were taking a regular temperature of the status of our franchise. I mean, it concerns all of us, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm comfortable right now that, you know what, our teams are going to survive and will survive. Will there be hardships? Of course. But I always come back to the hardships that the average Joe is suffering, through maybe even losing their home, their job, their small businesses. I mean, we're not going to complain, nor should we. And we're very fortunate that we've got such great support with our fan bases and our municipalities and our communities. And, not that I ever doubted this, but through this pandemic, as we were attempting to generate a path forward and to seek support at the government level, I mean, it was incredible what we saw in terms of, the power, shall I say, of the OHL in their markets, in their regions, and even, on the broader scale at the provincial government level.
Are you convinced post-pandemic, Dave, that you'll have 20 teams coming back?
Yes, I am, John. I am comfortable with that. And that's so important.
We're going to take a quick break. David Branch is with us, the commissioner of the Ontario Hockey League, and we'll continue after these messages. Bob McCowan, John Shannon with you, and today our special guest is the commissioner of the OHL, David Branch. I think most people, Dave, would be aware that for many years you wore two hats, as the head of the OHL and the head of the CHL. Now that no longer is the case, but I'm wondering during this pandemic whether there were any specific challenges that you faced in now. I mean, you've always run the Ontario League, but with an eye to the other two leagues and making sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. Now you're almost singularly focused. I wondered if that was difficult, a challenge, easy. How would you describe it?
Well, first of all, at the CHL level, when, as you say, I was involved as the CHL president, I was able to conduct my affairs at that level and regionally because of the great support I had from Ron Robison in the West and Gilles Courteau in Quebec. We were a team, and it was a wonderful experience. But what I felt was, continued growth and evolution. We had to have a singular CHL president, one that could focus solely on the CHL and take us to the next level, so to speak. And so at any rate, we were able to sell that through. We hired Dan McKenzie about 2 years ago now, and he's been a real godsend to us in terms of his resources and what he brings, and all the things that are so important as we enter the new world in terms of sport entertainment. And it's also interesting how life goes, Bob and John. I mean, the fact that I could then focus solely, largely, Not that you never disassociate from the national scene, absolutely not. We all work for the common good. But I'm so fortunate that I had now a lot more time to focus on the regional challenges, certainly that the pandemic brought.
Mhm.
So it's funny how life is and how, the timing of all
Yeah, the
this
timing of
occurred.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, I've actually thought about, wow, if this hadn't occurred, uh, I mean, stepping away from the CHL in that role, I don't think I could have handled it, quite frankly. So some people thought I didn't handle it anyway. So now I'm totally focused. But no, it's worked out extremely well from a timing standpoint.
That said, I mean, Danny and Ron and Gilles and you talk twice a day. I mean, come on now. This is
Yeah.
this is the bit, there when you think there's more than 50 teams, and more pockets of our country involved in junior hockey than any other sports league in the Dominion. I mean, gosh, it's not as if you've turned your back on the rest of the country.
Oh, of course not, John. Your comments bang on. I mean, we have scheduled calls 3 times a week. Okay.
Mm.
And then in addition, there's a lot of other calls that take place. And our other partner who's been great through this is Hockey Canada. And, it's funny. Hey, it's like adversity sometimes brings people together. You hope it will. Look at the Vancouver Canucks as an example, right? How it's brought that team, I would suggest, together, what they faced with the COVID outbreak. And we've been no different. And we've been committed, working together. And I can carry that down an extension. And I'm not just making this up. Like our 20 owners in Ontario are working, I would suggest, closer together today than at any other time because of adversity and understanding that it's a team effort.
I had somebody at a National Hockey League team suggest to me that what happened in Vancouver changed everything at every league level, American League level. And when I say changed, I guess because of the variant and the unpredictability of the virus now. Was that the biggest obstacle you probably faced after the return to play plan had been approved?
Well, it was on our mind, John. I mean, our return to play plan was before the Vancouver explosion with the variant. But I mean, the one thing that has brought great comfort with the terrible decision we had to make to not return and play is that there's 2 things. One, we can look every player in the eye and say, we tried our best. And secondly, while we'll never know this, you may one day be grateful that you didn't have the virus, because I still believe that we don't know all the effects or ill effects of the virus, not only today, but 5 years from now. And because I happen to believe that it is a very real virus that is of great concern. And we all have an obligation to manage it as best as possible.
Just out of
I just had to get.
Yeah. Sorry, I have the same kind of question, but go ahead.
No. Well, no, you go ahead, Bob. Please.
Do you have any idea how many of your kids caught the virus?
No, I don't, Bob. We've asked our teams to let us know, and I'll tell you what happened very early on. We touched on, did our players skate and have they seen ice and done ice? So at any rate, very early on in a certain region of our province, players were skating and an outbreak occurred where several of our players, along with other players from other leagues, etc., were subjected to the virus and so forth. But I think overall, as we know, for the most part, for the longest time, young people weren't high risk.
Or presumed not to be high risk.
Or presumed. Now that is not necessarily the case. But I feel comfortable in saying is that we've had the vast majority of our players who've not had the virus.
Now, you David, I've paid you this compliment before. You're the ultimate diplomat, but I want you to tell me the truth. Because I've talked to a few hockey parents whose kids are 16, 17, 18 years old. And they really feel that their children and, by connection, them have been robbed of something. I'm sure you've received some phone calls. What are you doing for my kid? How have you managed? Why are you doing this to my kid? How emotional have those calls been?
There's been some real good ones, John, no question. But interestingly enough, and I'm not trying to, I just received a letter yesterday from a parent apologizing for a particular call. Basically saying I was caught up in the emotion of the whole situation, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing I've long maintained is that, and I'm not saying it's exclusive to hockey, but hockey parents are crazy,
Oh yeah.
And the great thing,
there might be 3 of them on this call right now.
And I can recall in my illustrious coaching career that I would just shake my head, because it really reintroduced me to the rinks in many ways, and the game at the minor hockey level. But I get it, I understand it, and you've got to allow for it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because we all love our son or daughter and feel aggrieved that they can't do something that they have passion for.
Well, and the dream started at 5, and here we are a dozen years later, and it might disappear, and that's the fear. Is that
terrible?
I mean, yeah.
One of the common comments that came at me through parents and our teams is that players were struggling with mental health, okay, because they can't play. I really believe that. And on the side, we had a special Zoom conference with all our players put on by the Canadian Mental Health Association. But what was interesting is that both Ron Robinson, whose league was now back playing, and Jill, whose league was playing, said they were having a significant issue with mental health with the players.
Surprising.
So it wasn't a play, I would suggest. I mean, with media being the way it is now, and access to media, regardless of your age, I'm sure some people, young people, had some strong concerns about the virus, but didn't know how to necessarily interpret it and the whys and wherefores. So, but hey, you know what, John? If you don't understand the criticisms and the reasons behind them, you would never survive, right? So,
it's been a tough year for all of us, but no less so for your job, and the kids that you kind of oversee, who have aspirations to have a hockey career or just to play a couple nights a week at the highest level in their age group. We wish you continued luck, and hopefully we get to the point where come September, October, junior hockey is back on the ice. And we want to thank you very much for your time, as always, David.
Well, hey, thank you, Bob and John. Great seeing you both again. And our focus is getting back on the ice in the fall.
We got our fingers crossed for you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The commissioner of the Ontario Hockey League, Dave Branch, will wrap it up after these messages.
This week on The Sign-Off, Brian Aaronworth tells the story of how he unknowingly outbid Wayne Gretzky in the fight to represent Sidney Crosby.
There was a fellow in that meeting. His name was Pat Brisson. He says, Brian, I have a hockey player that I'd like you to consider. And he said the name Sidney Crosby. I remember leaving the meeting thinking, I better do some homework on this Sidney Crosby kid. And Pat said that there were other people looking to get Sidney under their umbrella.
Okay.
It's the same year, 2003. I'm having breakfast with Mike. All of a sudden, Mike gets a tap on the shoulder, and I look up, and it's Wayne. You guys mind if I have breakfast with you?
Yeah, sorry, this seat's taken, sir. How dare you?
at the breakfast table, Sydney's name came up. Wayne said something like, "Oh yeah, did we get that deal, Mike?"
Oh my God.
So it turns out that the people that we were bidding against
Or
was
your partners.
WG Authentic and Wayne Gretzky. Because I didn't know that at the time.
The sign-off is available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
McCown and Shannon with you. Again, our thanks to Dave Branch, the commissioner of the OHL, for joining us.
Yeah, we should also mention that this is Dave's appearance is also on the heels of the cancellation, postponement, whatever you want to call it, the World's Women's Hockey Championship.
Yeah, that's
that we're supposed to take place next month. Yeah, on Wednesday. Supposed to take place in Halifax. They're hoping to actually get their tournament done later in the summer. But right now, that's got to be a disappointment for women's hockey.
Well, I hate to say this, but we've been in this so long. We've been, all these leagues, all these sports. We want to do this. We want to try this. We're hopeful of this. We're blah 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 blah. We've lost an entire year of junior hockey in the province of Ontario, and the vast majority of it in the Western League and the Quebec League. And yes, they want to start up with a full season in September, October for junior hockey. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen.
No,
absolutely none. I don't even know whether I feel optimistic that that's going to happen. Do you?
I'm optimistic based on vaccinations, but it's not a 100% guarantee.
We're going to be lucky by September, John, to be at the place
March of 2020.
Well, wait, I'll tell you, it's good to be optimistic when there's so much pessimism surrounding you, but I'm not sure that it's realistic.
No, but it's good to have a plan just in case things can happen.
Well, you have to have a plan.
Some people haven't had a plan. No, you don't.
I got a plan, but you're still here, and so. The plan isn't working out exactly as I anticipated.
No, there's a vaccine for that. So
give me that, or you take it, whichever is the more appropriate. We got to get out of here. Another show for you tomorrow. We hope you enjoyed this one. Come back. Until then, for John Shannon, Bob McCown. Bye bye.